Hey y'all, welcome back. Welcome back. It is me, BrittReacts. I apologize for my voice. Allergy season. I don't know, guys. Anyway, I've been laughing a lot at Gen Z. I poke a lot of fun at them. We've been watching a lot of videos of them just embarrassing us on the streets of New York with their very wrong answers to very simple educational questions. But I do think it's a serious issue. I have three brothers that are younger than me. I have two children, and Gen Z needs help. So I saw that Brett posted a video not too long ago talking about this, and I just wanted to get her take on it. So this is Brett Cooper, how we end the Gen Z mental health crisis, which I think might be tied up in the lack of education crisis. Let's find out.
And I think that this is probably the trend with Gen Z that I just hate the most, because it's not just that Gen Z has retreated inward or failed to fly out of the nest in the first place. They are turning away from human connection on a whole for something that is far more superficial and a lot more selfish. Welcome back to another episode of The Brett Cooper Show. Today, I'm excited to talk about one of my favorite subjects. This is a subject that obviously means a lot to me. We need to talk a little more.
Because she is Gen Z,
I talk
right?
about it all the time, but we need to talk a little more about Gen Z. I know we always say that Gen Z is a very, unique generation, and we have all these struggles and problems, but if we're being honest, what generation does not have struggles and problems and unique quirks? That's why we have generations. That's why we are divided in that way. Every generation goes through different things in history. But what I will say is that Gen Z's struggles are a little bit different, because Gen Z's growth coincided with the growth of technology and social media in our lives, and our parents and our educators, to be honest, just didn't know how to deal with that. They didn't really know the impact that that would have on our lives, our adolescence, and how we were being raised. And it obviously has caused Gen Z a slew of problems, one of the primary ones being our mental health. That is something that we talk about in regards to Gen Z constantly. We are so mentally ill, we are depressed, we are anxious, all of these things, we are gender confused, and we can talk about these diagnoses all day long in Gen Z self-diagnosing and how that is represented in our society and yada, yada, yada. But I think to get to the root of the problem, to actually understand Gen Z and what is driving us and driving so many of these problems that make us so unique, we have to go beyond that, and we have to talk about Gen Z loneliness, because I think that that is what is actually behind all of this.
I don't know if I saw Gen Z loneliness popping up. Oh, that's an interesting take. I like that she is acknowledging that she is a part of Gen Z. I think sometimes you can see people disassociate themselves from things that involve them because they feel they're higher, better than, you know what I mean? But the fact of the matter is she was born in this generation, so she is a Gen Zer. Oh, I'm really excited to watch this now. I have reacted to Shoe on Head talking about male loneliness. I don't think I've reacted to her female loneliness videos yet. Have I? I don't think so. But this is interesting. I just got super excited.
But before we dive into that, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to our new Brett Cooper channel if you've not already. And of course, ring that notification bell to make sure that you stay up to date on all of our episodes. And of course, if you want ad-free episodes, if you want a weekly Dear Brett advice video, if you want an exclusive newsletter from me, check out Cooper Confidential. We will link it in the description below. That is my subscriber-only platform for unfiltered access. Hope you guys love it. Now, it's ironic that I just did a pitch to my Cooper Confidential platform, because one of the things that I love so much about that platform is that it gives you guys the opportunity to connect with each other, and you can comment back and forth on the newsletter and when you're submitting your questions for the Ask Me Anything. And so it's ironic that I pitched that, and now we need to immediately dive into loneliness. But again, like I said, I really do believe that that is at the root of Gen Z's issues. Just a couple of weeks ago in January, a new study from Kitty Bingo found that 72% of Gen Z experience regular loneliness, which is a huge, huge leap from previous generations. And guys, these numbers have been consistent for years. This was happening well before 2020. And I think for Gen Z and millennials and a lot of us, we kind of think of our lives like before COVID and after COVID, and everything changed after COVID. But for Gen Z, this has been happening. Like, for example, in 2019, there was a status study that showed that 79% of Gen Z regularly struggled with loneliness. So this is not simply a result of COVID or a result of lockdown. So when we talk about Gen Z struggling, when we talk about Gen Z mental health or Gen Z self-confidence, we honestly cannot address any of that. We can't even start to think about solutions for any of that without addressing this issue that, again, in my opinion, is the root cause of all all of this. Because if you're just addressing anxiety, if you're just addressing self-confidence, that is going to be a band-aid solution. Now, to help me flesh out this episode and go deeper on this subject, I called my friend Alex Kazemi. He is a novelist. He's the author of the book New Millennium Boys, which is a novel that gets to the heart of this specific issue following 3 boys in high school throughout the 2000s. And I asked him to break down the psychological effects of this growing loneliness and this growing isolation that Gen Z has been experiencing. Take a listen to what he had to say.
You know what I also like about her format is that she does bring in people who are qualified to talk about this, people in the field, perhaps people who she doesn't necessarily agree with or people that she's learning from. I think that's such a good thing. I think so often we see now on the internet that people just are spewing their own thoughts, ideas, opinions, and perspectives with no real grasp of the facts. And so I can appreciate that from her. Absolutely. All right, let's see what her source has to say.
I think loneliness, desensitization, and I think sort of viewing the world as if you are the sort of only person in the world, kind of, because your phone is your isolated, curated, controlled reality. And if you're constantly in this like self vortex of the self and the ego, you're never going to look past that. If you ever just take a break from your phone, like for like a few days, or technology for a few days, and I've heard so many Zoomers say this, that like feel this like inner silence. They're like, where's the noise? Like I actually can hear my thoughts, because you're not in that space of being constantly distracted, and that constant distraction is not making anyone happy. And a lot of the time, especially with young boys, is they're trying to numb something.
Now, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but there is something that Alex said that I want to touch on before we move on from this response of his. But he really said something astute about this loneliness and this isolation, making young people feel like they are the center of the world. And so I want you guys to take that and think about Gen Z's activism. Think about their superficial understanding of issues based on only their experiences, based on only things that they see on social media. Plus, add that to lonely Gen Z desperately wanting to be a part of something, wanting to be a part of anything. All of this activism, all of this community engagement, it starts to make sense. And so, in my opinion, Gen Z going so far left is less of a political phenomenon and more like a social one. Because again, if we're talking about the root of the problem,
that's a good point.
it all but again, I kind of jumped the gun on that. We're going to talk about that a little bit more on, but I didn't want you to forget what he said. And of course, before we can talk about the aftermath and the results of this loneliness, we have to understand how we got here. Now, I brought this up with Alex as well, and I wanted him to break down just how these societal structures have evolved over the past few decades. This is what he said.
I think what has changed the most from, the 1990s and the 2000s is the practicing of being obsessed with technology. Like, people in past generations were forced for face-to-face communication, right? They had no choice, with like the birth of AOL, right? Instant messenger, right? That would be happening at home, dial up at your computer. Whereas now you have that everywhere you go in your pocket. But we've also seen the acceleration of how hyper real everything with technology became, right? Like, so it's like, okay, from AOL to BlackBerry Messenger to, iMessage on your laptop and phone 24/7, right? Whereas you used to be able to clock out. Now you can't clock out. You're always online.
So obviously,
This is really, really such a good point. I think as a millennial, right, I like make fun of my brothers and even I have a young cousin who's also my goddaughter. She is a sophomore in high school. And, we give her a hard time about the amount of time she's in her phone. Like, we literally have to snatch her phone from her. I have to snatch my brother's phones out of their hands sometimes and just like, catch some air, bro. Touch some grass. But we can't really relate to their feeling of the needing of the phone, because as millennials, we grew up on the precipice of it all, right? So we all looked forward to going home and hearing the dial-up and getting on AIM and talking to our friends after school. Like, I will never forget my best friends, they're twins. They had a computer in their den. And it was one computer. There were 8 siblings. And when it was their turn to get on the computer, like getting on the computer with them, and like, it just was so fun. And it was something to look forward to, but we clocked out. You had to turn it off. Our time on that was very limited. And then I'll never forget, in the 11th grade or 10th grade, I got a sidekick. Do you guys remember the T-Mobile sidekick? I had a pink Juicy Couture sidekick, and on it there was AIM in it. And this was the era of the BlackBerry Messenger. And so, like, that is kind of where it all started, being able to walk around and have the access that no longer required dial-up. It was on my phone. And so we grew up both on the side without it and the side with it. And so we still have the ability, I believe, as millennials, for the most part, to disconnect. I know a lot of millennials, a lot of my friends, I am super big about taking social media breaks and fasting from social media, because I remember what it's like to be healthy and do without it. Just like have a need for it. Like my body is like, shut this off. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they don't understand that. They don't have that. They don't know what it was before that. All they know is that. And I don't know if I ever really stopped to think about that. I think that's such a good point. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. It is really
Whereas you
heartbreaking.
used to be able to clock out, now you can't clock out. You're always online.
So obviously, we all understand that. We experience it. I have my phone right next to me. We are on our devices 24/7. We have social media and digital technology in our faces 24/7. It is involved in our social life. It is involved in our education, our work. We literally cannot escape it. And I know that I said earlier that COVID is not completely to blame for this, but it certainly is part of the problem. Because for my generation, a lot of us were starting college or still in high school or in the middle of college when all the lockdowns happened. These are prime developmental years for young people that were just completely stripped away from us. We were sent home, we were living in tiny dorm rooms, just on our computers 24/7, completely isolated, not being allowed to even see our friends, not even being allowed to go to a class and see anybody in person. And I know that there are experts out there who have poo-pooed this and said, that has no impact, this is not gonna harm people whatsoever. Look at the numbers. We now have the evidence that this seriously harmed young people of all ages, Gen Alpha and Gen Z. The depression rates skyrocketed in 2020 because of this isolation. So it certainly heightened what was already going on. Now, in addition to that, online school has taken off, remote work has taken off. Think about a generation that was raised online, that went to college or high school in the middle of lockdowns, was not allowed to socialize with anyone, and is now being shot out into the workforce trying to get, a job in marketing at a company that has 100% remote work. Obviously, they're going to be lonely. Obviously, they're going to struggle with social skills. And then, of course, on top of all of that, which is already terrible, we have modern social media, which is just a completely different beast than AOL Messenger or MySpace or texting on your BlackBerry. And with that comes influencers. It comes closer access to celebrities, which actually we just talked about a couple of weeks ago, which obviously induces feelings of isolation, a lack of confidence, FOMO.
Jealousy.
And all of this has been extremely well studied at
Jealousy.
this point. And Alex brought all of this up.
I think the big change has been with the influencer culture and social media. And like, think about it. Think about being a young man today. You could go on Twitch and see some guy who has 1 million streams and is, posting pictures with hot girls and all this type of stuff. And all he does is play League of Legends. All these men have all these false gods for their niche.
Whoa, good. That's good. That's good. I think I get why they're talking about boys. But I think that's for all of us. All these false gods, all these false realities that we're getting to look at. People only post the reality they want you to see. Okay? And even when people are posting transparent, I'm going through this content, it's still only what they want you to see. And in these sweet little babies' minds that are still developing, they're entranced and they're jealous. They want it. Scary.
Algorithms. And I think why people stay online is because it has become the normal, right? So if you stay offline and are you're not
You're unplugged. You
into
don't know what's going
the
on.
mainstream, you're going to be ostracized.
And I know that we rag on social media all the time, but we do that for a reason, because social media has truly given Gen Z a warped sense of reality. From what a normal life is supposed to look like to what is happening in the world politically, it has completely distorted everything. And that is why so many parents now, especially parents of Gen Alpha, are keeping their kids off of social media. And it has been wild to watch the response of this, because again, this should be common sense. Based on everything we've seen with Gen Z, with millennials, with everything that has been studied, it should be common sense that parents should be cognizant about their children's access to digital technology and social media. And yet parents will post online saying, oh yeah, my kids don't have access to phones, they don't watch TV, they are not allowed on TikTok. And people are screaming in the comment section, you're a terrible mother, I would hate to be your child, this is abuse, you're so strict, your kids are gonna resent you. I'm like, Gen Z, look at yourself. Like, look at what happened. Obviously, parents are gonna take these steps. Like, again, this is just common sense. There is not a single positive outcome to kids being on social media. There's not even
one.
a net neutral outcome. Every single thing that has been studied has been a negative. And so again, obviously, parents are going to be more careful. I mean, governments are now even starting to pay attention, like Australia, who just 3 months ago banned social media for people under the age of 16.
I didn't know that.
And obviously, this is a very nuanced subject. This caused a media explosion with people arguing about government overreach and protecting kids, which I was able to break down thanks to my friends over at Ground News. Ground News cuts...
Oh, we love Ground News here. I'm going to skip this. Just so you know. If I just said to you, I have to take social media breaks because it's overwhelming for me, why does my 10-year-old need to be anywhere near that? And she asks on a weekly basis, and she gets shut down on a weekly basis. I think a lot of the problem is nowadays, because so many millennials are like traumatized from being seen and not heard, and I'm an adult, I don't care what you have to say, and just like the traumas of being raised by parents who couldn't rise to the occasion and the change in the world, or parents who were broken, so they raised broken kids. And I'm saying we because I struggle with this on a daily basis, especially with my child being home now in homeschool. We want our children to like us. We want our children to love us and want to be around us, and with that comes this guilt of when I say no to them and they get upset. It's okay. Get upset. It's okay. Go in your room and be mad. It's okay. Do all of that. All of that is normal, healthy. Actually, like when my daughter gets so upset and I hear her in her room, like audibly upset, I'm like, oh, she feels safe enough to close her door and go in her room and yell. Good. I never had that. I never felt safe enough to go in my room and like, ah, you know what I mean? That's healthy. Be angry. You can have all these emotions. But what you won't be doing is being on Instagram and on TikTok. You know what I mean? Like, it's not happening. It is not going to happen. And if you have to dislike me for a few moments, fine. I'm not your friend. I'm not your friend. I want you to feel so loved and so protected and so safe with me, around me, by me, that you can tell me anything. But please remember, I'm not your friend. And I think that is where a lot of this, like the gentle parenting and all this stuff is rooted in. It's like, I want my child. It's like my child can feel all those things and also hear the word no. They are, in fact, mutually exclusive. I can have both. Anyway, we're going to skip the Ground News bit. Shoe on Head does it all the time. So if you want to hear about it, go watch Brett or go watch Shoe.
It doesn't stop there. Their blind spot feed...
We love a long ad. Get your money, girl. And get the QR code. Go for it. All right.
Because the more time that we spend online spiraling, the lonelier we get. And we are seeing this reflected in our society every single day. And I think that this is the point in the episode where I could really talk about Gen Z political activism and tie that into this loneliness epidemic, because there has been a major jump between the generations in regards to this political activism. United Way actually conducted a survey about this last year, and they found that nearly 1/3 of Gen Zers, 32%, are regularly engaged in activism or social justice work, compared to 24% of millennials, and even less in Gen X and baby boomers, demonstrating a significant Gen Z commitment to societal change. They go on and they say, this engagement deepens among college students, which is, the shock of the century, where the percentage escalates to nearly 40%. In the realm of public demonstrations, over half of Gen Zers have participated in rallies or protests for specific causes or social issues, with a slight increase to 56 observed among those in college or in higher ed. So obviously, Gen Z deeply cares about this activism, and obviously they care about the issues, they care about their social causes. I mean, I've participated in rallies and protests, but again, if you go deeper, if you go to the root of the issue, I think this goes back to Gen Z wanting to be a part of something. Global data from the research firm Edelman also found that 70% of Gen Z is involved in some form of activism. And funnily enough, BBC was writing about all of these numbers and was writing about this trend with Gen Z, and they included a quote from none other than David Hogg, who is the newly elected DNC vice chair. There's been a lot of noise about him on social media recently. He is a well-known gun control activist, and he said, quote, "I am not powered by hope. I am powered by the fact that I have no other choice," which is probably the most chronically online Gen Z line I have ever heard. And again, it goes back to this idea that Gen Z sees themselves as the center of the universe, with
the
their
saviors
being the most important, the most significant,
and like they can save it all, right? Okay, I hear this.
Nobody else understands because they are so special. And it's probably just because they're not out in the real world touching grass and socializing and understand that they aren't the center of the universe. But I digress. Again, we can get into that at a later date. Now, another huge result of this loneliness and this isolation has been Gen Z not using substances, which is something that I've talked about a lot in a more positive light. But now that I've kind of had some time away from that, I've been thinking about this a lot. I think we have to ask the question, is this actually a positive for Gen Z? Like, is this a net positive coming from something that is very holistic and wholesome and good? Or is it just another symptom of the problem? Because some see these as major positives for Gen Z. You know, they're not drinking, they're not doing drugs, they're not sleeping around, they're not partying. And of course, I'm sure for some of those people, it is because of moral and health reasons. Probably those of you watching this video, you've made those decisions for those reasons. But for others, and I would argue the majority of people opting out of these substances, it is because of this loneliness, as an article in 2023 covered. The headline reads, "Gen Z teens lonelier, more apt to use therapy, less likely to do drugs." And all of these articles that have been written about these changes, whether they be sleeping around or partying or drugs or alcohol, whatever it may be, they do cite the health concerns, they cite the changing culture around drinking. But as time has gone on, because people have watched this kind of transpire for the last 5 years or so, a different story has prevailed, as covered by Time magazine just last month. They wrote, "Another contributing factor has to do with the changing socialization patterns of younger generations. Quote, alcohol tends to be a social drug even for young people. So part of the decline in underage drinking could be related to less in-person socialization. On average..."
Wow. Okay, I'm like sitting here like, how can that be a bad thing that less kids are doing things like that? But I get it. It's like, okay, but this shows that like they're less partying means less togetherness. I get it, but it's like, for me, this is a win. Is it not a win that these children are not partaking in bad things? You know what I mean? I don't know.
The amount of time people spent with friends in person decreased from 30 hours a month in 2003 to 10 hours a month in 2020, according to the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory on the epidemic of loneliness. That decline was especially marked for people aged 15 to 24. And so again, we have to ask, are these teenagers, are these younger adults, are they making these decisions because, you know, they've learned about the dangerous effects of alcohol, because they actually don't want to participate in underage drinking? Or is it because the parties aren't happening, because they're not being invited out, because they aren't socializing in person, and as a result, they're not drinking and engaging in that party culture? Now, this decline in in-person socialization that we just read about in Time magazine stretches far beyond the personal lives of Gen Z. It is now impacting the workplace, where Gen Z allegedly cannot engage in small talk or even socialize with their coworkers.
Lord have mercy. All right, guys, for the sake of my voice, I'm going to stop the video right here. If you want to watch the rest of it, this is stopping at 15 minutes and 38 seconds. Go watch it over on Brett. I'll probably end up watching it on my own time, but again, I'm trying to preserve my voice the best I can so I can keep making you guys content. I think these are really interesting points. I never thought about the social aspect. As you guys know, I've said it in this video, I have 3 younger brothers. One is 20. I have 2. Okay, so I have 1 biological brother. I have 2 stepbrothers. Let me clarify that, because what I'm about to tell you is I have 2 brothers that are 28. And then I have one that just turned 25. And I mean, just to see the difference in them is wild. But they are, I never thought about, like, especially my biologically young brother. He's very active in the community, and I never equated it to loneliness. But he said to me the other day, I don't really go anywhere unless it's related to like work or making money. I don't have any friends. And he said it in a like proud kind of way. And it just is so interesting to think about. I don't know. I have a lot of thinking to do about this as someone who's raising one Gen Alpha. And I don't know what's the generation they're calling after that. I guess both of my kids are technically Gen Alpha. You know, I don't know. I do think there is a crisis around mental health. I don't know if Brett is going to talk about the education part of it, but there is a huge crisis around that as well. Talk to me down below. I'm interested to hear. A lot of my audience are Gen X and boomers, and so I think your take on this is super important and super valid. So let me know. Talk to me down below. If you want me to react to this in a part 2, let me know. Again, guys, I'm actually in pain right now. My throat is killing me. So I'm going to leave it right here. I appreciate you for watching. I appreciate your perspectives and your opinions that you're going to leave. And I hope you have the day you deserve. Bye.